Welcome back to FinTalk, brought to you by VERMEG. Here we discuss pressing topics in fintech, regtech, covering regulatory, collateral and digital across banking and insurance and finance. VERMEG has been proud to deliver innovative software solutions in the industry with stability and cost efficiency for a global roster of clients. With over 20 years of trusted transformation in finance and insurance, we're bringing industry's top expertise to FinTalk. I'm Gerald Akhtar and I'll be your host for this podcast. Welcome back everyone to the FinTalk podcast brought to you by VERMEG. And today I'm delighted to have with me Gavin and Hanbury. Gavin, can I pass over to you guys for introductions?
Hello, my name's Gavin Stewart. I'm a director in Grant Thornton's regulatory practice. Before I joined in 2016, I'd worked for 3 consecutive regulators for 27 years, starting with the Bank of England in 89, and then the FSA and the FCA. And essentially, I commentate, I think, on what's happening in essentially UK financial regulation in terms of what it means, putting it in context, the sort of so what question, and how will the regulators actually go about implementing the things that they say they're going to do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gavin. I'm sure we're going to dive into that. Hanbury?
And as the regulars will know, Hanbury Hampden-Turner, I'm VERMEG's functional authority, which means basically I interpret the rules, both regulatory rules, both in the UK and around the world, and use those to run a team making specifications based on that.
Brilliant. Welcome, guys. Thank you for your time today. So today's topic is going to be around horizon scanning. We're kind of approaching the end of September. The year's flown by. We're kind of heading into 2023 and kind of into the future. You can see a lot of firms starting to talk about budgets and kind of priorities for next year, things like that. So there's a lot going on internally and externally. Obviously, kind of the key points I want to drive and get some input from Gavin and Hanbury. So recently, biggest change we've seen so far is in the leadership race. So we see that now finally kind of being bed down, and we have a new Prime Minister for the foreseeable future. So kind of over to Gavin, I kind of want to ask you, now that the leadership race is kind of confirmed and we have a new leader under the UK, do you see much priorities change or shifts around the PRA on the regulation?
I think the short answer is it's too soon to tell, and there's a lot of uncertainty, more so than you would expect. Financial regulation was a major part of the Tory leadership contest, probably more than you'd expect, probably more than is healthy. And since Liz Truss became Prime Minister and Kwasi Kwarteng became Chancellor, we do have some signs of what they want to do, which follows on from that. I think probably 4 points to make. One is there seems to be a pretty clear change of direction. So we've heard about Big Bang 2.0. Not a lot of detail yet, although obviously there's the bankers' bonus debate that has come up again. But we have seen Tom Scholar, the Permanent Secretary of the Treasury, being fired. That's what is being called across all the relevant networks, which is, let's say, unusual, and I think does indicate a change of direction, which was signalled. The second thing is the kind of almost too enthusiastic endorsement of central bank independence by the Chancellor. There's a little bit of Premier League board about this in some ways, particularly as we have kind of like bi-weekly meetings between the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England, at least for the time being. So that it'll be interesting to know what they talk about and how much restraint is shown on the one hand and how much strength of character is needed on the other. But there's clearly, some scope for influence there. The biggest legislative thing by far is obviously the Financial Services and Markets Bill. And we'll have to see how that travels through. But I think it's going to be more controversial than it would have been seen as 3 or 4 months ago. The competitiveness objective is getting more and more notice and building up. And it's hard to see it as just a secondary objective. It feels like it's becoming more major than that. And also clearly the reintroduction of the power for the Treasury to recall regulations that they think need another look at for whatever public interest need that they see. I think that will cast potentially a bit of a shadow over PRA policymaking. The caveat to all this, of course, my last point, is that a lot of this is already set out. The work is in train. So we have the regulatory initiatives grid. Be interested to see what that looks like in November. And also any major changes, we're talking primary legislation until the Financial Services and Markets Bill becomes an act, which is, let's say, next spring at the earliest. So it's going to be much slower than the rhetoric might suggest, but it does look like we've changed direction quite sharply.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gavin. There's quite a lot there. I know there's a huge shift and huge things and changes happening. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that. The grid to come out. That'll be an interesting read for all of us. So Hanbury, just to kind of in view of the new leadership, do you see any potential patterns for the future?
Yes, I think we can see a few. As Gavin said, it's we are presently short on detail. We've got DPM 422 has just come out, and that's long on intentions, but obviously short on detail. A lot depends upon, as Gavin said, the Financial Services Markets Bill that's going through. I think things will be slowish to start. The new Prime Minister surely has more urgent things to deal with than the detail of financial services legislation. So while the intentions will steam ahead, the detail may lag a bit. And I suspect it's also unlikely that Kwasi Kwarteng, as the new Chancellor, is going to be getting into the detail of the financial regulations. I mean, he's very much a principles and ideas-based politician. I don't think he's going to be trying to influence. He's not a technocrat in the same way that Liz Truss has a reputation for being. So I think we will see that. I think the progress will be slow because they want to integrate across lots of different policy streams. But I think that there is a definite pattern. So there's going to be more integration across different legal streams and policy streams. With the heralding of ESG and associated legislation and associated changes, we're seeing a lot more about social policy objectives, about environmental objectives, about environmental evaluations going into some of the traditionally financial areas. So rating bonds based upon their environmental impact, that kind of thing. And that doesn't have to wait for primary legislation. The government has shown a rather large willingness to use the Companies Act as a sort of way around primary legislation by making the change in behaviour not a requirement for the banks, which would require primary legislation, but as a condition of authorised persons within the banks keeping their banking licences. And that was used in the COVID crisis to try and get the COVID regulations through. That was used as in some of the SME support, although that was later entered into legislation on the European side as support for small and medium-sized enterprises. But I think we will see probably the Companies Act returning as a sort of shortcut way of trying to get banks into action without necessarily passing primary legislation. But I agree with Gavin. I mean, it is going to follow the pace of the Financial Services Markets Bill. We are talking about next year, I think at the earliest, for any actual effective measures, probably not early next year. I think the other thing we'll see is changes in particular areas. So I think what we're likely to see is far away from the EBA's somewhat systemic approach of trying to maintain everything at once and trying to do updates to everything at once. We're going to see the Bank of England, PRA and FCA focusing on particular policy areas and doing a lot with that. So the changes will be area by area rather than scattered and piecemeal. That's my prediction. Obviously, we'll see whether or not events bear that out.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks, Hanbury. Thanks, Gavin. It's a really interesting kind of overview of political landscape where we kind of see things happening and see things moving. Yes, kind of very much watch this space now. Hopefully we don't get another new Prime Minister before this all happens. So,
well, you laugh, but actually that is a possibility. I mean, one of the pressures on Liz Truss is obviously the fact that she was chosen by the Conservative Party rather than by the electorate.
Yes.
If she feels she has a decent chance of winning an election, she may well pull a snap election before the end of the year. And if she does that, then there's a small chance we'll lose and we'll get another Prime Minister.
It's true.
It could well happen.
Yeah.
It's unlikely, but it could well happen.
Yeah, it's very, very true, right? Watch this space. So kind of with a holistic view now, more looking at kind of on the ground view. So I'm sure Gavin and your team at Grant Thornton have been engaging with your clients as well as we have about looking down at budgets and 2023 and planning and what can we do, what should we look out for, is, what kind of key factors, regulations or initiatives do firms, kind of need to be considering or should consider really strongly for the new year. So kind of open it up to both of you. Gavin, if you want to go first, and kind of what your thoughts are or how your firm has been kind of guiding or helping your client base.
So I think, a lot of it is what you would expect. And to be honest, a lot of the activities probably on the FCA side with, most obviously the consumer duty and so on, and the ESG initiatives that Hanbury's been talking about. I think it'll be really interesting to see how much of that survives going through the winter and the cost of living crisis, because I think that, in reality, firms, senior management boards have to be focused on what they do around that, because it still has the potential to be, as severe, if not more so than COVID was. And we know what that did in terms of knocking back other agendas. So to be honest, all the work that we're doing is fundamental, and it's fairly obvious, and it's set out in the grid. I still have this big question mark though as to how much of that will be overtaken by events.
Yeah, it's factoring in the political landscape, and cost of living crisis, I think, is on everyone's agenda at the moment.
There's clearly quite a lot of the the reporting issues and international directives and so on, where the wheels have turned so far that actually that they will go through anyway. But in terms of new things that require the firm to build massive implementation programs and so on, I think that all those things are vulnerable.
Yeah. From my point of view, I think we are going to see a variety of changes on the ground, some of them quite soon, some of them well into next year or beyond. In no particular order, I think a lot of the temporary measures that we've been treated with are likely to become permanent. So I don't think the COVID legislation is going away anytime soon. I think all the temporary COVID measures are likely to become permanent, in the same way that the support for small and medium-sized enterprises just after the financial crisis, all those temporary measures also became permanent. I think we're going to see the expectation on behalf of the government that their legislation will change the market. So they're already talking about things like environmental repos, whereby if your present selection of debt holdings doesn't meet ESG requirements, why not repo it out for something that does? And this kind of sort of well-meaning predictions, I don't know if the market will necessarily support them the way the government thinks they will, but I think it does show a willingness to change the market and change the conditions of the market due to the measures they're passing. I think they are intending to make the behaviours change, and the measures we're going to see are going to reflect that. And this possibly is part of a sort of more broader theme of the idea that just leaving the markets get on with things is probably not going to be the popular view coming up over the next few years. I don't think there's going to be much appetite for the